This happened when I was about 12 years old, and to this day, it remains one of the eeriest experiences of my life. It wasn't anything dramatic or supernatural, but it left me with a chill that I still can't shake. It was late October, just a few days before Halloween, and I was home alone. My parents had gone to visit a family friend who lived about an hour away, and they trusted me to stay by myself for the evening. I was thrilled to have the house to myself, already planning a movie marathon and snacks. It was a quiet suburban neighborhood, and our house sat at the end of a long cul-de-sac with a wooded area behind it. There was something about the woods that always felt a little unsettling at night, but I never gave it much thought. That night, a heavy fog rolled in, making everything outside look like it was swallowed by a gray haze. I was curled up on the couch, engrossed in a movie, when I heard a knock at the front door. It was a slow, deliberate knock, 3 even taps, with just enough pause in between to make me hesitate. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I knew the neighbors well enough to know they wouldn't be out at this hour, especially in this fog. I got up cautiously and went to peek through the peephole, but all I could see was the dense fog, thick and swirling, obscuring anything beyond the front steps. There wasn't a shadow or a shape to indicate someone standing there. I waited a moment, thinking maybe I'd imagined the knock. Just as I was about to turn away, there it was again. 3 knocks, each one a little louder than the last. A nervous shiver crawled up my spine. I didn't open the door, but I called out, "Who is it?" Silence. No answer. Just the faint rustle of leaves outside. I waited for what felt like an eternity, then turned and went back to the living room. But as soon as I sat down, the knocking started again. This time, faster and more insistent. I hurried back to the door, my heart pounding in my ears, and checked the peephole again. Still nothing but fog. It was unnaturally quiet, like the world outside had stopped breathing. I wasn't sure what to do, but I figured I should at least look outside to see if it was a prank or someone who needed help. So I cracked the door open just an inch and called out again. "Hello? Is anyone there?" A burst of cold air rushed in, chilling my skin. I stepped outside onto the porch, my eyes scanning the empty driveway, the quiet street, and the line of trees just beyond our backyard. There was no sign of anyone. I stood there for a few seconds, listening, before going back inside and locking the door. I told myself it was just kids messing around, or maybe some animal knocking against the wood. But then the phone rang. It was one of those old landline phones with a cord, and we rarely got calls on it. The screen didn't show a number, just unknown caller. I picked it up, hesitating before I spoke. "Hello?" I asked. At first there was nothing, just a faint static hum. Then, in a low voice, so faint I almost didn't catch it, someone whispered, "Did you check the back door?" I froze. I hadn't. My skin prickled as I slowly turned to face the kitchen, where the back door was. It had a small window, covered with a thin curtain, but through it I could see the dark silhouette of the backyard. My pulse raced as I approached the door. I reached for the handle, then stopped. Through the curtain, I could make out a shape, something moving, almost undetectable just beyond the glass. It wasn't big, maybe the size of a small child crouched low. I couldn't make out any details, just the shadowy outline. I backed away, suddenly feeling very exposed, like I was being watched. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed the phone and called my parents, trying to keep my voice steady as I told them what was happening. They said they'd be home as soon as possible and to stay inside and keep all the doors locked. I hung up and went to my room, locking myself in until they arrived. I heard no more knocking, no other strange sounds, and when my parents came home, they checked the yard and the house but found nothing unusual. The next morning, I went outside, half convinced I'd see signs of some kind. A footprint, something moved or broken. But there was nothing. The ground was undisturbed. The fog had lifted and everything looked completely normal. Almost too normal. For a long time after that, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something had been there that night. It was just the way those knocks had come. Like they were calculated, like someone knew I was home alone. And that whisper on the phone, it felt too real to be a prank. I never found out who or what was knocking, but I never answered the door at night again, not after that. Even now, when I'm alone and hear a knock on the door after dark, I can't help but remember that night. It still sends a chill down my spine. It was Halloween night, and my friends and I were out in the countryside near our town. We had the idea to drive out to this abandoned barn a few miles away. It was one of those places people used to talk about, saying it was haunted or whatever. We thought it would be fun to check it out and maybe scare ourselves a little before heading back to town for some parties. The road out there was long and empty, barely any streetlights, just darkness and the occasional rustling of leaves. We finally found the barn. It was run down, with half of the roof caved in and weeds growing through the cracks in the old wooden boards. We parked the car a little ways away and walked the rest of the distance. There were 4 of us, me, Jake, Sarah, and Mike, and we were all just goofing around, making jokes to keep the mood light. But the truth is, being out there in the middle of nowhere, we were all a little on edge. We hadn't been inside for more than a few minutes when we heard it. This strange noise coming from outside, like a low growl mixed with a kind of screech. At first I thought it was just an animal, a coyote or maybe a bobcat, but then we heard what sounded like footsteps in the dirt outside, circling the barn. Mike, being the brave one, decided to go out and take a look. We followed behind him, keeping close just in case. As we stepped outside, I saw something move near the tree line, about 50 yards away. It was tall and thin, walking on 2 legs, but in this weird, unnatural way, almost like it was limping or dragging one leg behind. At first, I thought it was a person dressed up in some kind of costume. It was Halloween after all. But then it let out this sound, like a cry or a wail, and I felt this chill crawl down my spine. It wasn't human. I can't explain it exactly, but there was something wrong with the way it moved and the noise it made. It was like it was trying to mimic the sound of a person, but it wasn't right. Jake called out to it, yelling something stupid like, "Hey, nice costume!" And that's when it turned and looked at us. Its eyes reflected the moonlight, glowing in a way that wasn't natural. It started moving closer, and I could see that its limbs were too long, its movements too jerky. It wasn't a person. We backed up toward the barn, and I could hear Sarah whispering, "What is that?" over and over. None of us had an answer. The thing kept coming, slowly at first, then it broke into this awkward sprint. We bolted for the car. I don't know how we managed to pile in so fast, but as soon as we did, Mike floored it, kicking up gravel as we sped back down that dirt road. I looked out the rear window and saw it standing there in the road, just watching us leave. It wasn't chasing us anymore. It was just standing there, like it knew it had scared us off. We didn't stop driving until we were back in town, where the streetlights were bright and there were people walking around in costumes. For a moment, everything felt normal again. But none of us talked about what happened for the rest of the night. We just acted like it didn't happen. It wasn't until a few weeks later that I heard a story from one of the locals about a skinwalker sighting not far from where we were. I don't know if that's what we saw, and I'm not sure I want to know. But I haven't been back to that barn since, and I don't plan on it. Whatever was out there that night, it wasn't something any of us should have messed with.